Hey everyone, welcome back to my live weekly speaking test series where I respond to this week's latest IELTS speaking questions. Alright, let's go. Part 1. Do you normally remember people's names? Usually I find it fairly easy, but there have been occasions when I might have met someone new and I might have just forgotten what their name is, especially if it's some kind of social gathering. But there have been occasions as well when I'm trying to do something related to my work and I just forget someone's name. I don't know why it happens. I guess my memory is kind of getting worse with age. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's fairly easy, although I might take a couple seconds to recollect their name if I'm not, speaking to them regularly. But mostly it's fine. Is it easy for you to remember people's names? Yeah, for the most part, as I said earlier. Although, if it's someone with a name I've never heard before, or maybe if it's something confusing, or if it's a name that I know many other people also have, then I might be confused. But usually I tend to remember faces pretty well, names not so much. But yeah, once I remember something, it's there in my memory. So it's not something that I'll just easily forget. But I do find that maybe I have to make a conscious effort to remember names, compared to other people who might find it super easy to remember. Like you just tell them your name once and they remember who you are. So that kind of thing doesn't really happen with me. I tend to have to make an active effort. Have you ever forgotten someone's name? Yeah, so this happens frequently actually. But when I say forgot, I don't mean I have no idea what their name is. It's just that I might need some time to remember their name. Like last week, I was trying to send a file to someone and I just couldn't remember their name because obviously their name is associated with their email ID. And I was just thinking, gosh, what is this person called? I know their name starts with like, a D or something. Oh, but I forgot what the ending was. I forgot, what it was. It took me some time, to remember their name. So that might happen. It's not very frequent, though for the most part, my recollection is pretty quick. But I might have difficulties at times. That's the most recent one I remember. That just happened a couple of days ago, in fact. But yeah, there have been occasions when I'm thinking, gosh, I talked to this person, but I've forgotten their name. But that's not common. How would you feel if someone forgot your name? I wouldn't feel any particular way about it. I mean, it happens. You can't get upset over it or something because I know, because I can put myself in that person's shoes. I know how it can be confusing for me, so I would probably give that person a pass. I mean, it's okay to forget things, especially if, I mean, you can't reasonably expect someone you just met, to remember your name. But if like someone you've known for a while forgets your name, then you're thinking, then you start to think like, oh, what's that? That's weird, because I mean, when was the last time you ever forgot like a friend's name, right? Or if you forget a coworker's name, that doesn't really happen, right? Because you speak to that person every single day, you see them every single day. I mean, for most days. So then you think, okay, well, if that's the case, if a friend forgot your name, I think in that case I would kind of be upset because that's just very weird, now, don't you think? Uh, Maybe they're just not as close as you thought, yeah? Maybe that's the case. Okay, let's see what we have for part 2. Describe an old person that you admire. You should say, who is this person? How long have you known him or her? What kind of qualities does he or she have? And explain why you admire him or her so much. As usual, I'm not going to take any time to make notes, although I do recommend that you take time to make your notes because it does, tend to help you stay on track and, make sure that you're writing what you need. So, Abed says, hi, please raise your voice. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I'm not sure why that's the case. Let me just see. Is it fine now? If it's still low, just let me know. Yeah? Let me check some settings. You might want to increase the volume. Let me just see if there's anything I can do from here. I think it looks pretty fine. But you can just let me know if it's okay now or if you're still facing an issue. But I'm just gonna go ahead. As I was saying, I don't really make notes, so let me just start. So, a couple years ago, actually, I think this was 6 years or maybe 7 years ago. I don't remember exactly when this happened, but I was doing this pre service teacher training course. It's called the CELTA, and I think we had three teacher trainers assigned to us, and we were like 10 students or something. So during this time, of course, we, got to know each other pretty well. And of course, they were, much older compared to us. We were just in our 20s. Some people were in their 30s. I think I was one of the youngest, in fact, back then. So naturally, I mean, they were in their 50s and so, but one of them was, I think, yeah, she was 63, would you believe? And I mean, you could obviously tell that, okay, this person's much older, but she wouldn't let it on, I mean, she was very active, and I mean, it's not like the usual idea that you have of, an older person who might be like slow or who might have trouble enunciating or who might, be kind of shaky. Yeah, none of that, none of that was true of her. In fact, she had a lot of energy and she was very quick, very sharp, very quick, and it was really inspiring because, I remember this one time I was just sitting right next to her and I was thinking, wow, this person has so much energy. I mean, they have more energy at 63 than I did back then, at like 20 or 19 or something. That's kind of a weird thing, because I know I tend to be a low energy person, but that was really inspiring. First of all, she was extremely fit, and I think that's, of course, an important thing. As you grow older, you probably want to ensure that you're, working out because obesity tends to be one of the biggest problems you can face. It really impacts your health. It's a silent killer. That's why it's called a silent killer. And that kind of really woke me up like, yeah, if I want to have, a healthy life and, I want to not be a burden on other people when I'm older, I really need to step things up in my own health. So obviously it's been a long while. I don't think I've been in touch with her since I guess 4 or 5 years or something. We only knew each other for like a month because it was just a 4 week course. But we do tend to, email occasionally. I tend to, keep her updated on things. Of course, like I said, it's been a long while since I've, interacted because again, she's busy. She has her own things to do. But I still remember that just as fresh as it was, as if it was yesterday. So that really left a mark on me. I can't think of any other older person, like, really old, like 60, 70 or something. That's the one that comes to mind. Okay, let's see what we have for part 3. Okay, let's talk about retirement. I'm not sure if there's any kind of a delay because I'm not sure if you can see this page. If you can see my part 3 page, you just let me know. Yeah? Okay, so at what age should people retire from work? This depends really on who you are, what kind of work you do, if you like your work, if you dislike your work. There's so many factors. There's this movement called FIRE, Financial Independence, Retire Early, which to me makes a lot of sense because, I mean, this whole traditional idea that you retire when you're 62, 65 or whatever, 67 even sometimes, it's kind of weird, like spending 40 years doing a 9 to 5, that's not my idea of a fulfilling life. But this depends a lot. I mean, the work I do, it's not a regular 9 to 5. I control everything and I find it enjoyable. So I don't find myself thinking, oh, when should I retire? That thought doesn't really cross my mind. But yeah, if you work a very, very intensive job and you don't really like your work and you're just doing it for the money or something, then you probably would think, oh gosh, when am I finally going to retire? So in that case, you probably feel like retiring at 40, 45 or something. But again, if you really enjoy, if you're really passionate about what you do, like I am, I don't even think about retirement. I think, okay, this is something I can continue for a really long time. And again, it's not really work in that sense. Sorry, I have a bad throat. So yeah, it's not really work in that sense because I don't see it as work. I see it as something I'm enjoying. And I could see myself doing it when I'm 60, 65, 70, if I'm still alive by then. What kind of problems can people face after retirement? I think maybe the biggest concerns would be loneliness and financial insecurity. I just saw this documentary a couple years ago. Why am I saying just? So I saw it a couple years ago. And there were these people who were like, 65, 70, etc. And they were looking for plastic bottles, tin cans, cardboard, and stuff like that in trash cans because they could collect it and send it to a recycling center and earn some money. They were getting pensions from the government. They were in a fairly good country, but they were still struggling, despite getting 400, 600 euros pension, which of course is not enough. I mean, that's barely going to cover your rent in a place like that. So that's a major concern. Even if you do get a pension from your government, it might not be enough. And sometimes people just don't plan very well, right? So they might, have certain issues, especially if you have health issues that can really, take a huge chunk out of your savings. And then, of course, you have the problem of loneliness. I mean, when you're at, the traditional retirement age, 65 or whatever, sometime around that, by that time, even though you have kids, they probably, have their own families. They probably live somewhere else, work somewhere else. So you're kind of separated from them. You've probably seen your family members, your friends pass away. So again, your social circle, it just keeps dwindling. And as you grow older, it becomes more difficult to make friends. I can experience that, at my own age, and I'm not even that old. So that's another contributing factor to making you feel like, oh, you really got, you don't really have much of a support system. Of course, not everyone has the same story, but largely these tend to be the two biggest issues people face. How important are retirees to your country's economy? So people have this misconception that people who are retired just take money and they don't contribute anything. But again, this is my background. I mean, I've studied economics, so this might be a bit easier for me to understand compared to a layperson. But the thing is that if you're older, you naturally, for most, I mean, this is of course not a 100% thing, but for the most part, older people tend to have more wealth. They have more money saved up. And I'm not just talking about retirement accounts, but I'm also talking about savings and investments for the most part. And so they are able to buy higher ticket items. I mean, there's this whole phenomenon where, older people who are in their 50s and 60s tend to buy, boats and yachts and stuff like that. It's a very boomer phenomenon, of course, not applicable in every country, but they tend to be able to finance higher purchase items compared to someone who's like, 20 years old in their first job, maybe, just still struggling in their career, right? So this whole idea that yes, they are getting money, but it's not free money. When you pay taxes, you have your social contributions, healthcare contributions, retirement contribution, all kinds of insurance. You're getting the money back. There's no such thing as a free lunch. So that misconception, I think, has to change. They are important. They contribute in other ways. They have in fact already contributed. And when you account for inflation and things of that nature, the amount that they receive is not really what they should be getting. It's just not comparable. Yeah. So the economy still benefits from them, even if they're collecting a pension, which in my country, for example, isn't so popular. Most people just have to fend for themselves. It's every man for himself out here. When should you start saving money for retirement? So that's a very interesting question. I think a lot of people don't really think about retirement, especially when they're in their 20s and 30s. I know it's not a very glamorous topic to think about, but if you start thinking about this when you're already 40, 50, it's too late. I mean, it's not too late. Maybe I shouldn't be so harsh, but at that age you have more responsibilities. You have a mortgage, you have kids, you're more of an adult then, right? I mean, there's many things that you need to be paying for, and so it becomes more difficult to save at that age. But then if you only got 20 years to retire, you obviously have to save a lot more of your income. So that's, it's like that's really difficult to manage. But if you're just 25 or something and you're just starting out in your career, yes, you of course would have a lower income, but you also don't really have a lot of the traditional responsibilities, right? And it's possible to save more money, but you have to be prudent. You have to be diligent in terms of having a budget and making sure you're putting away some money for retirement. And the great thing is that when you're younger, you have to save less because compounding interest works in your favor. Even if you don't necessarily want to invest somewhere in the stock market, you can still just, squirrel some money away and over time that corpus will just keep growing. But if you're, if you only got 10 years to retire, or 15 years or 20 years, not only do you have to save more, but you get to benefit less from compounding interest. So that, I think, is something which more people need to be taught about. Why do some companies encourage early retirement? So this isn't super popular where I live, but some companies, especially larger companies, tend to do this. If you're already like 58 or 50, 60 or something, and you just got like 4 or 5 years until you officially retire, it makes a lot of sense for them to offer some kind of severance package. Like, okay, here's 2 or 3 years of your salary, and here's a nice bonus, and both of them can part on good terms. Instead of having to deal with an employee whose productivity is dwindling, who might be making a few mistakes. Again, I'm not being ageist. It's just a biological fact. When you're older, you know, it's the body's processes tend to be more erratic. You tend to slow down. You're more likely to make mistakes. You have more issues with vision and speech and things like that. So obviously, if you have an employee who's like 55, 60, whatever, they've got like 30 years of experience, you can't pay them minimum wage. You can't pay them less money than what they're worth, right? But you could have that person accept voluntary retirement, and you could instead hire someone younger, or maybe hire two younger people who, of course, I mean, are not going to be as proficient as this older person, but they might also make fewer mistakes, and ultimately they cost the company less money. So I think it's a good idea. Of course, not every company can afford to do that, especially a small business. It's just unthinkable. I mean, small businesses are just struggling and surviving. But this kind of thing, if it's a multinational company or a really large company, it's a good idea. I think it's a fair deal for both parties. Do you think the government should take responsibility of retirees who've worked in private companies rather than government organizations? So this doesn't really happen in my country. Of course, every country has a different system. For if you're a citizen of, let's say, the EU or North America, you do have a pension system, social security, or something of that sort that you pay into, that gets taken out of your paycheck either automatically or you file for it, and you just get the money back regardless of where you worked. If you've been self-employed, if you worked for a government company, private company, it doesn't matter, right? So there it's pretty easy. But in most economies across the world, there's really no safety net. It's you have to fend for your own self. And so a lot of people in my country especially tend to really favor government jobs, even though the competition is insane and the conditions may not be the best, but it's very, very secure, right? And you also get a pension. So obviously it works out fine for them. But when I think of the logistics of making this happen, I'm not sure just how much of a good idea it is. Nothing can be implemented overnight. If they were to announce, okay, the government's going to pay every single person a pension, every single retired person a pension, doesn't matter where you worked, I think that would really crash the economy. I mean, it's just, where is all this money going to come from, right? Because we don't have that system. We don't have that system where we're taking money out of people's paychecks for, social security and unemployment insurance and health insurance and contributions. We don't have that system. We don't have the EU system where a good 40% of your paycheck, just gets taken out. And if that did happen, people would be extremely mad. There would be riots on the streets, if they announce something like that. It would be super unpopular because people are so used to the existing system that any change, even if it's something that's generally good, right? Hey, you're helping people with money, that's a good thing. But obviously, I mean, it doesn't come out of thin air. The money isn't free or something. So I think it depends really, because you as a person, you as an individual, you have the ability to save for yourself. So it's just a question of being prudent. Yeah, you cannot expect daddy government to take care of you for your entire life. It's just not very realistic. And at some point, you have to mature and you have to take responsibility for your own life. It's a shame they don't teach it in schools, but then of course your parents should teach you or something like that, right? Okay, well, that's all for today. Yeah, so now I'm going to be pretty regular with writing and speaking. I hope to see you next week on Wednesday when I'll be writing a brand new essay. If you haven't watched the Thursday's video yet, you can always go back and check. And I'll see you next time. Until then,